What's up, gang? I'm Chuck Pineau. You can find me on Facebook, that name, Instagram on that name. You can find me on Twitter at ChuckyPin. You can find my Chuck's Raw Reviews on YouTube. You can find my publishing wing, Bonfire Press, on Facebook. And, of course, you can find my works such as Welcome to the Void, Belial, which recently just left Kickstarter, issue 2, and Essence House, which is not only a hit audio drama, but now a novel that is on Kickstarter with only 2 days left to go. Tyr, what about you, homie?
Oh, man. So, Tyr Jackson, a.k.a. Tyr. I am the owner, creator, editor-in-chief of Sovereign Comics. You can find me on Facebook at Sovereign Comics. You can find me on Instagram, Sovereign Comics, Twitter. I got a TikTok that I use for promoting. I figured out a way to make it work for comics. I also have my own website, www.sovereigncomics.com. You can get to my shop through there. You can also get to my shop through the links in the bio. Not only that, I am also the editor for this title from Millennial Comics called Delta Dogs. I'm the editor and the letterer for that. I am also the previous associate editor for Beautiful Soldiers. I pretty much stepped down from that position to fully work on getting my stuff out since the ball really started rolling even faster. But LaShawn and I we're still close friends. Still work together. But yeah. Hello, Wendy. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
I don't have a long intro ready to go. Like these guys just
no one's gonna.
Here's my arm length intro, and I'm like, no.
So resume. Here's my resume.
You don't understand. we're dudes. We often get judged by our length. No one's gonna judge you by your length. So you're fine. You're fine. We're happy with whatever a female will give us. So go right on ahead.
All right. Well, I am Katrina Roets. I am an editor and proofreader under Cat Scratch Press, which is my business. You can find us at catscratchpress.com. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch. I'm a lot of places. I am also an author. I currently have Tales from the Toy Store out with two second book finished and third book in progress.
Wow. If you guys want to put all your links in the comments, you can totally do that.
Definitely. So you said you didn't have a long one. You got a resume.
I got a little something.
I'm just Greg.
Just Greg. Sometimes it's nice to be just someone, though.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the panel for editing comics.
Yeah. Jeez.
I didn't think editor was important in the beginning of all of this, and then I learned it's like very important. So. Yeah,
that's one of the first things whenever I started off, other than writing, that I really tried to practice on was editing. But of course, it's different from editing your stories to editing your comics. It's a totally different beast. So of course I was editing my stories and going through everything and looking at spelling and stuff like that. But of course, when I got to the comics and when I first did my my very first comic, I realized that the editing had to go into panel count for each page and page count and dialogue and so many different things that I started bringing into it. And I'm like, oh man, okay, there's more to just editing the story. You have to edit so many different things. And one of the big things for me with editing, one of the things that I actually had to really, really practice with in the beginning was panels and dialogue, because and that's something that I usually point out now whenever I work with individuals is their dialogue, and I tell them to say more with less, pretty much, because some people like to do the paragraph dialogues and stuff, and
that used to be me.
It used to be me too. And that was one thing that I learned, I had to say more with less. So I broke out the trusty thesaurus and everything else, to learn how to say instead of saying that sentence, that whole 7-word sentence, you can break it down into 3 words or break it down into 4 words. So that was one thing that I had to learn. That's one thing that I tell people, say more with less. Like, it's okay if the character doesn't give a monologue, now if it's that character and that's the type of person that they are, then I get it. But not every character should be giving a Shakespearean monologue whenever they step into a panel.
Well, and sometimes you don't even need dialogue. Sometimes it could just be like, Stacy gives Frank the side eye. And you're like, yeah, that's all you needed. And that's something we need to remind ourselves is, like,
yes, it is.
They're there to do part of that. They're an extension of the writer. So utilize that.
Yep, exactly. Like those actions, like getting artists that know how to draw those body movements. And then, like you said, the side eye. And like you said, you don't even have to do dialogue. Like if the character says something crazy in the last panel and then you have like, the co-star of that comic, and they just kind of look at them like, that says enough. Like, right off the bat, like, okay, they said something they weren't supposed to say, without going there, So that's perfect.
I was just say, Mike, spelling being your enemy is why people like me have jobs.
Exactly. Exactly.
Proofreading is really a lot more of what I do with comics. I do some, but I'm more of a story development editor versus a how many panels editor. If it comes down to you're looking for somebody how many panels something should be, I send them to Chuck.
Yeah, that's a tricky one too, because like, of course, they have all the different things out there, like, oh, you only want to do 4 panels or 6 panels or never do more than 8. But that's the tricky part too. Like, and the way I started looking at it was in a sense, kind of telling a mini story on each page to tell the full story, so, and that started helping me with my panel count. Cause I remember sometimes like after the book was drawn, I go back and look at it. And I'm like, oh man, maybe I didn't have to put 7 panels here. I could have put 5 and carry 2 of those other panels over to the next page because they actually go better with the panels that are on that next page. And that next page might have 3 panels, and that was something that I started figuring out, something I started learning. And that's another reason why, like, with my artists, I kind of, I trust my artists. I've been working with my artists since 2016. And I trust them to make decisions like that. Like, there's been times where he'll be like, I don't think this needs that many panels, when I was learning. Or he'll say, I think it should have an extra panel. And then I'll add that and we'll go from there and things like that. So,
yeah. Well, and I think it's also really important to remember that things happen between the panels, and we need to understand what happens between the panels so that you can continue that story without having to bog it down with every single detail. Rather than having to show someone drop the spoon, you can have them with the spoon and then have the hand open and the spoon down, or the lines showing that it had been dropped, and then we don't have to go through every little bit of it. There is a story that happens between the panels, and as long as we're all acutely aware of it, we can move on and not have to worry about it. Because a lot of people try to bog down their pages trying to show everything, and it's like, that is shit that you can show between panels.
Yep.
And that can just be shown with little changes to the art and small little things. So yeah.
Like, even if you think about animation, like now they have different parts of animation. I forget what it's called because I took my animation classes a long time ago. But you can have the starting point and the starting point, middle point, finishing point, and then there's a way you can build the rest of them, all the in betweens. So if you think about that with your panels too, like you just said with the spoon, they have the spoon, they're eating, and then all of a sudden the next panel, the hand's open, and the spoon is either not there or it's you see like the tail of it down at the bottom of the panel. And that helps too. And also you can tell those things that happen with those panels instead of doing every panel. Like, they have the spoon and then you do 4 panels to show the spoon falling to the floor.
Yeah.
Instead of doing that, you could even do action words where it's like cling and then you're like, oh, they dropped the spoon.
Yeah, totally.
Or dialogue, or the next panel pops up and the friends look, hey, you dropped your spoon, everything okay? There's ways that you can go around that so you don't have to put be like me and putting 7 panels on. When I first started putting 7 panels on a page, and those are the things that I learned going through editing. And I started even with that, in that same mantra that I say, say more with less. Even with that is the same thing with the panel count too. You could say more with less, if it's needed. Sometimes you might have to squeeze out a little more, to adequately tell what's going on.
Yeah. I would say for Trish's comment there, I would actually say more is more.
Yeah.
Give us a lot so that we can cut it down.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't give us enough, then you've got to start tacking stuff on and throwing it on. It's better for you to almost do a whole book of 9 panels, and then we can just chop, and bring it down.
Exactly. Even with the writing, like the Delta Talks when I'm working on, like he'll ask me, can you chop down this dialogue? And he'll come to me with that longer dialogue, and I'm glad that he does, because then I can read it, see exactly what was on his mind, and like, okay, this is how I can chop it down. Now we just took 14 words and made it 7, and it works out. And so when you're writing the roughs, I would say with most editors, at least, I don't know, I'm speaking for myself, and Chuck said the same thing. I'm pretty sure this might be right for Katrina too, because she shook her head. Yes, come to us with more so we can chop it down and make it better. But you can't be afraid for us to chop it down either.
Because we can't put words in your mouth. Like exactly. I think, and I know Katrina and I have had this conversation many times. We're not going to tell you what to say. That's not our place. That's what a writer does. So for us, we're going to tell you maybe what not to say, or in the case of you giving us a rough with not a lot of stuff there, we'll be like, you need to flesh this out. There needs to be more here. Mm-hmm. And usually that's going to be all we give you, or we might say, I would talk a little bit more about this subject or that subject, flesh out this part, but that's all you're really getting from us. We're usually not going to put words into your mouth. Katrina, what do you think?
Yeah.
I don't. I look at it differently, slightly. If I'm a proofreader, that's what you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get my grammatical corrections. You're going to get, we don't use semicolons in comics. So you're going to get that kind of stuff. If I'm fully editing, I may make a suggestion, but I'm not rewriting your comic.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So there might be some suggestions.
I may be like, that if you've got vary anything, there's usually a word for that. Writers are yes men, editors are no men. I
kind of.
Yeah.
Well, for me, in his case, because I have a lot, and then he's like, "We're not doing this." I was like, "All right."
No, we're not doing that.
Yeah, which I love that he goes, "Nope," and you go, "Yeah, okay."
All right.
Okay, I can tell that in like 7 stories in the future. It's fine.
I'll just put that in the side bin. We'll be back.
Yeah.
And that's another thing with the editing too. Like, I don't know how far out you've all have edited issues and stuff like that, but that continuity, is up to the writer to keep it, but it's up to the editor to check that. And we all read comics, and sometimes we'll see that we're like, oh, somebody dropped the ball, somebody missed something right here. This isn't making sense, because the continuity doesn't. Now, like what Chuck and I were talking about in the other panel when we were talking about character and world building. Now, if it's supposed to change, mention that, and usually as an editor, I'll catch that like, hey, was this supposed to change? And then if the writer's like, oh no, that wasn't. I forgot this, and they'll give it to, okay, there we go. All right, now we're back in. Or if they say, yeah, then I'm like, well, tell me what happened that made it change. like that's supposed to be in there, so that the reader knows what's going on, and they don't feel lost.
And I think I mentioned that in the last panel too. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest things that especially like the developmental editor will do is to ask why.
Yeah.
Why is this here? Why are you doing that? Like, we need to understand the motivations. Because if we understand it, hopefully the reader will understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's huge. So as an editor, the biggest thing you can do is question everything. Why are you doing this? Why are we doing that? I really wanted to color it like this. Why?
Yeah.
Well, because it looks cool. That's not good enough. Give me a better answer, or don't fucking do it. Like one or the other.
Exactly, especially like if that panel doesn't call for it, Like I've seen people where they'll want to put reds in the background, and this isn't the individuals that I've worked with, but other individuals, where they'll tell the colors to put reds in the background when an area where it doesn't need that, like it's a calm area, and they're like, oh, red in the background. I'm like, no, now you're exciting people now. They're thinking something's going on.
Not unless it's an apocalypse.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and then if it's an apocalypse, yeah, that's totally different.
If this is supposed to be soothing, I don't want to be seeing those colors.
Reds and colors that are going to excite me. Like if they're sitting there having a conversation. Now, if they're having a conversation talking about how they're going to destroy somebody, and you see it on their face, then I can see a gradient of a red because you see them getting angrier and angrier. But other than that, it's like those in the editing part too, like working with the colorists and stuff, and working with the writer and making sure that they meld and get everything correct that they are trying to portray. But editing is short is hard.
Oh. Yeah, true story, man.
It's fun, but it can be hard.
Yeah, I mean, I did a book a while ago where the main character got this kind of tribal tattoo type thing from something that had happened to her, and yet the rest of the art, like I would say 75% of the art didn't include the tattoo.
Oh wow.
I was like, is there a reason why she suddenly doesn't have it?
Yeah.
That's kind of a permanent thing. And
I didn't want to draw it all the time. Then you shouldn't have given it to her.
Right.
He legitimately kind of said, he goes, I just forgot. I was like, pay attention.
So speaking, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chuck.
Well, no, it's just there's really intelligent shows and stuff that have done things like that. Things like Archer. Archer has a tattoo on his back. He's always wearing suits and whatnot. And then every once in a while, he takes his clothes off, and you see that on his back, and you're like, oh, that's right. And it takes you back to that. So if you're going to do a tattoo like that, put it in a spot on them where it's covered most of the time. That way, when it's uncovered, we're like, oh, that person's fucking brilliant because they remembered it.
Exactly. Right. That's that continuity thing.
Absolutely.
Keeping up with it. But I have a question though. Like, how many of you have actually seen something like that and then suggested a way to make it creative? Like with that tribal tattoo, for instance. Like if it's all of a sudden it's not there, and you're like, okay, so are you going to draw it, or do you want to make it a magical tribal tattoo? And now all of a sudden it's only there.
Well, in this particular case, it was a kind of the moment that she got it was kind of a key moment in the story. So she needed to keep it.
Yeah. So
she needed to keep it. And so I just so when I went through giving notes, I was just like, it's not here. It's not here.
Yeah. Put it back. That makes sense. Like I guess in those key moments like that, it will need to be there. But I don't know. Like there's been some.
What, Wendy? I think I know your editor, and I don't know that I would listen. I'm just saying.
Well, it was like weeks later, and I'm like, you don't need to worry about that. Like it's been a while. You don't need to, we don't need to see the scars necessarily. Things heal up. So yeah.
Yeah, I think in my first issue of Ink, I think the key tattoo, which is like the most important tattoo, is on a different arm at one point. When I was
I've seen that kind of shit.
I was like, shit.
Yeah.
I was like, well, he's got to make sure not to do that next time.
Yeah.
All that I didn't see him. I was like, oh, okay, I understand.
Oh, that's funny.
Every once in a while in those edits, things do slip through the cracks, and then you're like, issue 2. I gotta fix that issue 2. I gotta make that work.
Yeah, last year I was more excited because my writing came to life finally on like pages. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. But like now I'm like a little more strict, and Dylan is definitely strict. He's like, why is that person's face like that when it's supposed to be like angry or
what you're saying makes sense though, because I know when I started and I finally started seeing my writing get drawn and then get colored, and then it was time for me to letter. You're geeking out. Like, oh my god, I'm doing it. So you miss those things, which is why it's important. That's why I tried to learn editing as much as I can, but it's important that, especially if you're on your first one, find an editor that is good, that's going to catch those things and kind of help you, stay reined in, because when you're geeking out, you're gonna miss so much stuff. And that's how it was for me. And when I get the print back, I'll look at it, I'm like, how the hell did I let that go? So it's like you try to either fix it in the reprint, or just, all right, I'm gonna let it slide and make sure it's not like that issue too.
Yeah, I don't know who wants to field Travis's question there.
That person doesn't exist, so never had that issue. And I've worked with Travis before, so it's definitely not Travis.
Travis, there are some people out there who think that, like, I can do everything, I don't need an editor. You know those books when you see them.
I didn't know how much a letterer was last year until I actually, like, Travis is like, use Jerome, and I was like, okay. But I had Dylan do it, and I was like, so I'm going to use Jerome now.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, you should do that.
Lettering is an important thing too, because I letter my comics, and that's another thing that I studied up on. And I studied letters in Marvel, DC, and stuff like that, because a lot of people think it's just throwing words in a word balloon, and it's not. It really isn't. The first book I lettered, that was mine, was freaking horrific, because you're trying to find the right font size, you're trying to find the right font, because you don't want to be the one using Comic Sans, which I have seen in some indie books. I'm like, is that Comic Sans? Like,
well, it's a comic book.
It says comic right in the name.
It's perfect. No, you don't want to use. No, there's so many comic fonts that you can use that doesn't have.
Well, and then you got like the crossbar eye rule, and you've got like how far away from the bubble the words should be, and how much separation there should be between the word, between one line of dialogue and the next line,
and not putting words across the lines of the bubble.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Or putting tails directly in people's mouths, or part of the bubble over someone's fucking face.
Covering the art, like I've seen some books where major pieces of the art were covered, and like they'll say something in the next panel, and you're like, I didn't see that in the other panel, because the word covered it, and on top of that, like crossing tails, or here's a pet peeve of mine too. You have two people talking, right? Of course, but the first person's who talks bubble is down here, and the second part of that conversation is up here. Naturally, left to right, top to bottom, so it should be like that, you know. But I have where people would do that, and they'll say, "Oh, well, it was more space there." Then you probably should, I don't know, rearrange the. Well, that's where it comes in. You should have either rearranged who said what, or you should have said less with more. If the person who initiated that conversation and they had a paragraph, you probably should have condensed that so that they could have a bubble.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how important a good letterer is for that reason. I mean, I've picked up comics and I've read them and I've gone, what is the flow of this conversation? Where am I supposed to start this? Because if I start it where my brain and eyes naturally go, it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, when Dylan lettered our first issue of Seer Chronicles, the one criticism that we kept getting was, so, like, who lettered? And I was like, well, it says in the first page it was Dylan. They're like, yeah, you should get a letterer. I was like, yeah. Because I was trying to read this one conversation that is now not in the remastered version, and it's a cop talking to this other character, and it's going back and forth, but, like, the bubbles are, like, just kind of smushed together because trying to fit it. Yeah, it was bad.
I think that's probably... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Katrina.
Nope, I think Chuck was going to say something.
Oh.
I was just going to say real quick, the thing about it is that's why I think it's so important to have the dialogue down in your script, so that the artist understands how much dialogue is going to be there and who says what and when. So because of that, then they can draw around that. And, often you'll see in roughs, they'll rough it out and then they'll have little balloons to dictate where you would thus put it. Did you just have an apocalypse at your house, Tyr? Holy shit.
Yeah, dropping nukes.
like fucking Fallout all over there.
It's bright outside.
And I'm just wondering if Greg brought enough for everyone here.
Right? What is the invisible Z method?
I'm guessing none of us use it because we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
What is that? Put that in the next comment.
Yeah, let us know it because we might do it and not know that that's what it's called.
That there's a name for it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know
what that is. See, he's pulling us. He's like, I'm gonna test your editing skills.
He's like, do these guys really know anything?
They really know anything. They'll know the invisible Z.
Don't hire them. They don't use invisible Z.
Oh, one of my favorite stories about editing is an artist was tasked to write and draw a whole book, and he's not normally a writer, so he got in touch with me and he said, could you edit this? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, I can help you out, man. So it was his first real script, having to write it and stuff. And so he wrote it out, and I sent him messages, and I sent him all my notes. And
I know what he's talking about. Panels. Yeah.
There's a guy, Blackfly Press, and he actually shows that. I don't know if it's in one of
you can do that with the word balloons too, which I use it heavily to help guide the reader's eye across things. So like if I want them to see certain parts of the art, or if I want it, like let's say you have the character and the character is going into a like a shocked stage or something like that, I'll use the word balloons to kind of guide you across that, to lead you to that character as they're looking shocked and stuff. But yeah, okay, invisible Z. Yeah, I do it. I'm pretty sure I probably do it too.
It's just so invisible that we don't even realize.
Yeah, don't even realize. It's not there. We do it naturally.
I tried searching on Google.
Call it the natural Z, Travis. There you go. It's the natural Z.
but yeah, the artist he'd written the script, and I'm going over it. And I was like, okay, so your big problem is actually pages 5 and 6. You have a double page spread here. And he's like, I don't see what the problem is. And I'm like, they're the same piece of paper. So here's 5, here's 6. And he's like, oh shit. And I'm like, yeah, the turn pages are the odd pages. It has to be 6 and 7 or 4 and 5. And he's like, oh shit. I'm like, yeah, those are the same pieces of paper. You can't do a double page spread there. And so he was like, it was so cool seeing that light bulb go off. He's like, I just thought I could write them wherever. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't work like that. And so it's fun. It's something that we have to do where like often I'll be like, I'll kind of hold open my hands and I'm imagining, seeing these 2 pages and what would this look like? What does the turn look like on that page? And so you kind of have to picture it in a way that the writer might not, because we have to see that page in our mind's eye and really understand, And so I'm very big on the importance of turn pages as mini cliffhangers and getting people to constantly want to turn that page. And it's very important. I treat it as, what I'll always tell them is, those turn pages are like commercial breaks. A commercial break has to fucking hook you so that you're willing to deal with 3 minutes of shitty advertising and still be there when they come back with the rest of that story. And so those turn pages have to hook them enough that they're willing to flip the page and keep going. Because anytime you allow your reader to stop or make them feel like they have to go back and reread something, there's a good chance you lost them. And so give them no chance to go back and read, or no chance to want to stop moving forward until the very end. Then then of course they can go back and they can reread and they can scrutinize and do all that stuff. We all want that. But on that first read through, they should just zip through it and just be super excited and feel the flow and just want to keep moving. And so if we've done our work right, their eyes go exactly down the page. They pick up everything that's important. They move on, and then they'll come back and they'll find all those cool little intricate details and all those neat little things that Easter eggs and stuff that people might have written or drawn or whatever in there.
There you go, Chuck. Got a compliment from Wendy.
That's it, right? That's my girl.
See, that's the cool stuff. That turn page really, really matters. And like you said, another thing that I use to kind of, as I'm editing and I'm working with folks is writers, and I'm also, working with myself since I'm a writer, is the dialogue too. Because like if you can keep engaging dialogue, that'll keep them flowing through it also.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that I learned. Like everybody will come back, oh man, your dialogue is amazing. It's like, well, I want you to not get bored. I don't want you to get tired of a character when they go to talk. Like, I wish this character would shut the hell up. Like I don't want you to think that, whenever you're like, unless I want that to be the character, because I do have a character, and I really and Greg probably, because he just read Temple High, so he probably knows the exact character that I'm talking about. And everybody came back and said the same thing. They were like, I hate her.
Yep.
I wish she would shut the hell up.
Man.
And I was like, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted you to feel. So if you felt that means that I did her dialogue. I edited her dialogue correctly. I as far as like her being in pages, I put her exactly where she needed to be at, to where it would aggravate you, and even with the page turns, like even with some of the stuff she said off panel, that's a tricky one too. How do y'all deal with off panel dialogue? Like, do y'all enjoy it, or do you tell your writers not to really use it too much?
I use it. I'm not an editor, so
I use it too. I use it too with certain things. Like if I want something to be said that's funny, like how she was like, tell them to stop looking at her, because even though she did all this stuff to try to elevate herself, she pretty much just slammed herself in the ground in the process because other things came out. So I did that little off the panel thing to kind of add a snicker. But I do know that a lot of people, and I've talked to other editors where they're like, oh, I hate off panel dialogue,
No,
Katrina?
I'm good with it. As long as it's not overused.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't constantly have a character off panel.
Yeah.
No, I only do it a couple times, I think. In my story.
I think I look at it kind of like comics mirroring real life.
Mm-hmm.
I've had conversations with somebody who's in the next room.
Yeah.
They're off panel.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Yeah.
But I don't tend to have entire conversations that way. We tend to move into the same space, and
you're eventually get that. I can't hear you. Get over here.
Would you just come in here and stop yelling at me from across the house?